My name is Victoria, and the morning my husband became CEO of the company I helped fund with my mother's inheritance, he had a process server at my door before the ink on his nameplate was dry. 16 years. I gave up my career, my contacts, my name in this industry, all of it, so Darnell could climb. And the morning he reached the top, he filed the papers before he even came home to tell me about the promotion. He listed that company as his sole separate property. He told his attorney I was a housewife who wouldn't understand the financials. What he didn't know was that my signature was on the founding documents, that my $40,000, my mother's money, was the reason that company existed at all, and that I had already made a phone call that morning that he would not find out about until it was far too late. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. I made his coffee the same way I had for 16 years. 2 scoops of dark roast, filtered water, the pot set to brew at 6:45 so the smell reached the bedroom before the alarm did. That was mine, that small, deliberate act of care. I built it into the architecture of our mornings without anyone asking me to, without anyone noticing I had. That's the thing about the rituals you keep for other people. They become invisible the moment they become reliable. The kitchen was quiet. I liked it that way before the day got loud. I had the counter wiped down, Devin's old soccer schedule still stuck to the fridge from the year he turned 16. I never could bring myself to take it down, and a grocery list started in my own handwriting on the notepad by the sink. Normal, ordered, mine. I heard Darnell's footsteps on the stairs. I'd been reading that sound for so long I could tell you his mood before he hit the landing. Quick and light meant good night's sleep. Slow and deliberate meant something was turning over in his head. That morning, they were different. Measured. Almost ceremonial. He came in wearing a suit I hadn't seen before. Deep charcoal, fitted in a way his other suits weren't. New watch on his wrist. The kind of watch a man buys to match a title. I noticed all of it in about 3 seconds and said nothing. "The board confirmed it last night," he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was adjusting his cuff, watching himself do it. "I'm the new CEO." I set the coffee mug down in front of him. "Congratulations," I said. That was it. That was what we gave each other in that moment. 2 sentences that used to belong to a marriage and now felt like a transaction between strangers. He didn't say we did it. He didn't say I couldn't have gotten here without you. He didn't even reach for me. He just stood there with that new watch catching the morning light, wearing a posture I'd never seen on him before, like he'd been practicing it. You know what I keep coming back to? It wasn't the absence of a hug. I've gone without 100 things in this marriage and found a way to make peace with each one. It was the way he looked at me, or more precisely, the way he looked past me. Like I was a fixture, like I was the coffee maker. He took his cup and went back upstairs to finish getting ready. I stood at that counter with a dish towel in my hand and felt something cold and formless settle into my chest. I couldn't name it yet. I just knew it was the kind of feeling that doesn't leave with distraction. I went through the day on muscle memory. Grocery run, 2 loads of laundry, a phone call with Devin, our son, 22 years old and sharp as a tack in a way that still surprises me even though it shouldn't. He asked how I was doing, in that careful voice young people use when they know something is off but can't prove it. I told him I was fine. I told him his father had good news. Devin went quiet for just a beat too long. I remembered, standing in that laundry room, the year I'd turned down a regional operations director offer to take Devin to his allergy appointments twice a week. Darnell had a trade conference. It needed to be me. I never thought about it twice. I should have thought about it twice. The knock came just after 7 that evening. I opened the door and a man I didn't know handed me an envelope with the flat efficiency of someone who does the same thing 20 times a day. He said my name like a question. I said yes. He pressed the envelope into my hands and walked back to his car before I could form another thought. The return address on the paperwork was a law firm I didn't recognize. I sat down at the kitchen table. I opened the envelope. I read every single page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed that morning. I checked the timestamp twice. The board vote was the night before. He had filed the papers the same morning he told me about the promotion, probably before he even came downstairs for his coffee. I read the asset disclosures the way I used to read freight manifests, line by line, methodical, hunting for what didn't match. The house, the joint accounts, the vehicles, his retirement fund. I went through the list 3 times. What he included told me what he valued. What he left off told me everything else. I poured 1 glass of wine, just one. Then I picked up the phone and called my closest friend since college, Nadine Fossey, a CPA who has never in her life given me advice without documentation to back it up. I told her what I was holding. I heard her breath catch. We talked for 47 minutes. I kept my voice level every single minute of it. The crying waited until I set the phone down on the table and the kitchen went completely still. Then it didn't wait anymore. I was up before 5, not because I set an alarm, because my body had apparently decided that sleep was a luxury I'd have to earn back later. I lay there in the dark for about 10 minutes, listening to the house make its small sounds, and then I got up and made coffee. Same 2 scoops, same filtered water. Old habits don't check the calendar. I sat down at the kitchen table with the petition and a pencil. Fresh eyes, cleaner head. That's the only advantage a sleepless night gives you. I read the whole thing again, slower this time. No whine, no shock, no 47 minutes of Nadine's voice keeping me tethered. Just me and the document and the pale blue quiet of 4:50 in the morning. I circled everything in the asset disclosures that felt wrong. The house? Listed. Joint checking? Listed. His 401k? Listed at a figure I knew was low but couldn't prove yet. The vehicles? Listed. And then, at the bottom of the business interests section, 3 words that made my pencil stop cold. Sole separate property. That was how he described Cole Logistics, the company he'd been climbing inside for 16 years, the company that was now, as of yesterday morning, his to run as CEO. Sole separate property. I set the pencil down. You know what the interesting thing about arrogance is? It makes you sloppy. A careful man would have been more precise, more lawyerly in that language. But Darnell was riding the high of a board vote and 16 months of planning, and somewhere in all that confidence, he wrote down 3 words that assumed I didn't know what I knew. I called Nadine, my closest friend since college, a CPA who has seen more financial deception in her career than she ever wanted to, at 7:15. I asked her to come before work. She was at my door by 8. She sat across from me at that same kitchen table, the petition spread between us, her reading glasses on and a legal pad at her elbow. Nadine doesn't do anything without a way to take notes. She read the disclosures the way she reads everything, quietly, completely, with a stillness that means her mind is moving very fast. He listed the company as sole separate property, she said. Not a question, a statement delivered the way you'd state that the stove was on. He did. She looked up. Victoria. I know. I got up. I went to the back of the bedroom closet, up on the shelf behind the winter blankets, and I pulled down the box I have kept in every house we've ever lived in, through 2 moves, a basement flood, and a kitchen renovation that displaced every other piece of our life for 6 weeks. I kept that box because I keep everything. Always have. I carried it to the table and opened it. 16 years of paper. Organized the way I organize everything. By date, by category, rubber-banded in labeled groups. I found what I was looking for in under 2 minutes. The founding documents for Cole Logistics, from back when it was a 3-person operation with second-hand office furniture and a dream Darnell couldn't have financed alone. My name was on the founding documents. My $40,000, My mother's inheritance, the money she left me when she passed the spring before Devon started kindergarten. The money I put into that company because Darnell said it was the only way to get the doors open. That capital was documented. The equity certificate was there. Signed, dated, fully valid, never transferred, never relinquished. I remember her handwriting on that birthday card the year before she died, the careful loops of it. Baby, you always were the steady one. She had no idea she was funding something bigger than any of us could see then. I set the documents on the table without a word. Nadine stared at them. She picked up the equity certificate, held it, set it back down. She took her glasses off, which she only does when she's thinking something she needs a moment to say correctly. He either forgot this existed, she said, or he assumed you didn't know what it meant. Either way, I said. She nodded slowly. I don't need a divorce attorney first, I told her. I need a corporate litigator. Nadine looked at me over her legal pad, and something in her expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition, like she was seeing something step back into focus. I'll ask around, she said, quietly. Quietly, I confirmed. That afternoon, I photographed every document in the box before I put it back, every page, every signature, every date. 2 copies saved to a cloud account Darnell had never seen, and 1 printed set in a sealed envelope I dropped at Nadine's apartment on my way home. I called a divorce attorney's office and scheduled a consultation for Thursday. I told no one else. That night, Darnell sent a text at 9:42. Short, businesslike, the tone of a man who expected a response he'd already scripted. When do you plan to respond to the petition? I read it. I set the phone face down on the nightstand. Some questions don't deserve an answer. Some questions are about to get one they're not ready for. 3 days after the petition landed on my kitchen table, I sat across from a divorce attorney in a quiet downtown office with cream walls and a window that looked out on nothing interesting. Nadine was beside me. She had her legal pad. I had my folder. The attorney was thorough. I'll give her that. She walked me through the standard picture. Equitable distribution, the marital home, retirement accounts, spousal support based on the income disparity. 16 years of marriage, one spouse who stepped back professionally to support the other. She said I had a strong position. She said it with the careful confidence of someone who has delivered that line many times and meant it every time. I was listening, but I was also already past it. I let her finish. Then I slid the equity certificate across her desk. She looked at it, read it carefully, looked up. He listed the company as sole separate property, I said. Her expression didn't change dramatically, but her pen stopped moving. This certificate was never transferred or relinquished? No. And the capital contribution is documented? $40,000. Wire transfer records, founding documents, my signature on 3 pages. She set the certificate down with the particular care people use when they're touching something they know is significant. Mrs. Cole, this is a marital asset he had no legal right to omit. We'll need a formal business valuation, but depending on where the company is currently, I know where it is, I said. She nodded slowly. Then you understand this changes the landscape considerably. I did. That was exactly why I needed time. You know what Darnell was counting on? Speed. He filed fast, moved fast, expected me to be reactive and off balance. A grieving woman, financially dependent, emotionally wrecked. That woman responds to his timeline. That woman takes whatever settlement his attorney drafts because she needs the bleeding to stop. I was not that woman. I'd like you to proceed slowly, I told her. If anyone asks, I'm still processing emotionally. I'm not ready to engage directly. Cite that as the reason for any delays. She looked at me for a moment. I held her gaze. I need 90 days, I said. A beat passed. Then she wrote something on her pad, capped her pen, and said, I can work with that. That same afternoon, I drove out to an office park on the east edge of the city, the kind of place the freight industry has always loved, close to the interstate, utterly unremarkable from the outside. I'd called the night before. He picked up on the second ring. Raymond Briggs, the man who mentored me through 6 years of freight logistics operations before I ever met Darnell, opened his office door before I finished knocking. He is 58, semi-retired, with the unhurried manner of a man who stopped trying to impress people decades ago. He shook my hand with both of his, the way he always had, and gestured to the chair across from his desk. I remembered the summer he made me run the same load planning simulation 4 times in a row until I stopped second-guessing my own numbers. "You're not slow," he'd said. "You're just not trusting what you already know." I was 26 then. I still heard it sometimes. I sat down. I didn't ease into it. "I'm coming back to the industry," I said. Raymond looked at me. No surprise, no performance of concern. He folded his hands on the desk and said, "I've had a freight brokerage license sitting in a dormant holding structure for 3 years." My hands went still. "I was waiting for the right partner," he said. "I don't think the timing is a coincidence." It wasn't. We both knew it. We shook hands across that desk, and it felt less like a beginning than like a resumption, like picking up a sentence someone had interrupted 16 years ago. That evening, in the borrowed desk space Raymond cleared in a back corner of his suite, I opened a blank document on my laptop. The office was quiet. One overhead light, a view of the parking lot, a coffee maker that had seen better years. Nothing about it was glamorous. I didn't need glamorous. I needed space that was mine, even temporarily. I typed the heading at the top of the first page. Victoria Ardmore, Business Plan, Cole Freight Partners. My maiden name, the name I had before I became anyone's wife. I said it quietly to myself, and something in my chest settled, like a knot releasing one loop at a time. I started writing, not dreaming, writing. Concrete, structured, market analysis, entity formation, projected revenue timeline, infrastructure costs. 16 years of institutional knowledge from inside Darnell's world, now deployed entirely for mine. I worked until 10. The following morning I retained a corporate litigator, separately from the divorce attorney, without informing either one of the other's existence. I paid the retainer from a savings account I had opened 4 years ago in my name alone, during a period when some quiet part of me had started keeping a door unlocked. I drove home. I made dinner. I moved through the house the same way I always had, steady, unhurried, present. Nothing had changed as far as anyone watching could tell. Everything had changed. 2 weeks after I retained both attorneys, I established a system. Home until 8, Raymond's office by 8:30. At home, I moved slow. I left the divorce petition on the kitchen counter where anyone walking in could see it. I let the grocery list get a little shorter. I didn't answer Darnell's texts right away. I was performing grief, and I performed it well, because underneath it, the real thing was still there. I didn't have to manufacture the weight. I just had to let people see it and stop there. Raymond's office was different. Raymond's office was where I became someone else entirely, or maybe where I became myself again. I still haven't decided which. The entity documents for Cole Freight Partners filed on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the papers landed on my counter. Victoria Ardmore, registered agent. My maiden name, clean as a first breath. Nadine had already drafted the financial structure. Separate accounts, separate paper trail, nothing that touched the divorce proceedings in any traceable way. She set it up with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. No drama, just done. Let me tell you something about 12 years of industry events. 12 years of showing up to dinners and conferences and trade show cocktail hours on Darnell's arm, in whatever dress he'd approved, holding a glass of something I barely drank. Not once was I introduced as anything other than my wife. Not my name, not my background, just my function. But I was listening the whole time. I knew the regional vendors who were chronically undercut by Darnell's procurement team. I knew the mid-sized shippers who complained about response times at the hospitality suite bar after their 3rd drink. I knew who was loyal to the relationship and who was loyal to the rate. I'd filed all of it away without knowing exactly why, just that my brain worked that way, cataloging, sorting, holding on to things that might matter. They mattered now. I spent the first week making calls, old contacts, careful conversations. I was back in the industry. I had a new operation. I had Raymond's credibility and my own knowledge, and together, those two things opened doors that would have taken years to reach cold. Raymond brought 2 anchor clients. Both were regional distributors he'd worked with for over a decade. Steady volume, reliable pay cycles, the kind of accounts that give a young brokerage its footing before it can afford to be selective. I brought 3 more. The third one, a mid-sized electronics manufacturer outside the city, I'd met at a trade dinner 6 years ago. The logistics director and I had talked for 40 minutes at the buffet line while Darnell worked the room. I remembered his name. I remembered his freight headaches. He remembered that I'd known exactly what I was talking about. He signed on in under a week. You know what Darnell was doing while I was building that client roster? He was spending. The household expense contributions stopped without notice. No conversation, no explanation, just absence in the account where the deposits used to be. I noticed on a Wednesday morning, checked twice, and called no one. I moved money from my private account to cover the gap, noted the date and the amount, and forwarded the records to my divorce attorney. Documentation. Everything is documentation. He started appearing publicly with Tara Rowe, his VP of Marketing, 34, the kind of polish that takes maintenance. About 10 days after the contributions stopped. A restaurant downtown, a company event posted on someone's public social media. He was not hiding it. He wasn't trying to. A mutual friend called me, stumbling over her words, not sure what she was supposed to say. I thanked her for telling me and got off the phone. My jaw locked for about 30 seconds. Then I opened my laptop. I heard later, through Devon, my son, who was visibly pained every time he had to relay his father's words, that Darnell had told people Victoria just couldn't keep up. Said it casually. Said it the way you explain why you traded in an old car. That one landed somewhere specific. I won't pretend otherwise. But here is what I did with it. I put it on the board in my head right next to every favor I'd called in and every client I'd signed, and I let it sit there as evidence, not of what I'd lost, but of what he'd never understood about what I was. Nadine came by on a Thursday evening with updated financials. 5 clients, clean books, the company already passed its first operational threshold. She spread the pages on the kitchen table and looked at me with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has been waiting a long time to see a thing done right. "You're real," she said. "We were always real," I said. I came home on a Friday evening to find 3 pieces of furniture gone. The leather armchair from the study, the side table from the hallway, the standing lamp from the bedroom corner. Just gone. Gaps where things used to be. I walked through each room. I made a note of every item on my phone with descriptions, approximate values, and the date of removal. Then I called my corporate litigator and left a detailed voicemail. Then I made dinner in the quieter house, sat down at the kitchen table, and went back to work. 6 weeks into the proceedings, Nadine Fossey, my closest friend since our first semester at Clark Atlanta, now the most dangerous CPA I knew, showed up at my door at 8:45 on a Saturday morning with a tote bag full of printed spreadsheets and a highlighted copy of Darnell's financial disclosures. She did not say good morning. She said, "Put on more coffee." I put on more coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the divorce petition 42 days earlier, and she arranged the pages in front of us with the focused economy of someone who had already sorted through the mess and located the bone. "My corporate litigator is calling at 9, I said. "Good." Nadine tapped the top page. "Because this needs a lawyer in the room." The call connected at 9 sharp. I put the phone on speaker and set it between us. My corporate litigator, a deliberate, methodical woman who had been practicing business litigation for 20 years and did not waste a syllable, walked us through what the forensic review had turned up. She was calm about it. That calm was the thing that told me how serious it was. People who deal in bad news professionally get very, very still when it's actually bad. The first finding. 3 months before Darnell filed for divorce, he transferred a commercial real estate asset out of the marital estate. A distribution depot. Concrete, functional, unglamorous, that the company had used for years as an operational hub. He moved it into a newly formed LLC registered solely in his name. 1 member, 1 signature. Filed quietly, recorded quietly, designed to be invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. Nadine slid the relevant page toward me and pointed to the LLC registration date with her pen. My hands went still. "He pulled it before the filing," I said. 91 days before, my litigator said, which is notable because it just clears the standard look-back window, or he intended it to. It doesn't clear ours. Fraudulent conveyance. I knew the term from my operations days, from contracts and compliance trainings I'd sat through years ago. You can't transfer assets specifically to put them out of reach of a creditor or a spouse when you know a legal proceeding is coming. The intent is what makes it actionable. And the intent, my litigator said, was documented in the timeline itself, which brought her to the second finding. You want to talk about a gut punch? Here it is. The financial preparation for this divorce did not begin when things fell apart. It did not begin with any honest unraveling. Dedicated accounts opened 22 months ago. Asset repositioning, slow, incremental, just under any threshold that might flag a review. Legal consultations billed through a company expense account as general corporate counsel. A methodical, sustained 2-year construction project. And the thing being built was a legal and financial architecture designed to leave me with as little as possible. 22 months. Devin had just turned 20 at that point. I remembered his birthday dinner. All of us at the table, Darnell laughing at something Devin said, my hand on the back of his chair. I'd bought Darnell a new dress shirt for the occasion because he'd mentioned offhandedly that he needed one. I remember folding it into the gift bag myself. He was already in the planning stages. I didn't say anything for a moment. Nadine didn't either. The litigator let the silence exist without filling it, which I appreciated. "The growing apart story," I finally said, "is not supported by the financial record," my litigator said. "It's supported by a narrative he built afterward. The money tells a different story." Here is something I've come to understand about evidence. It does not care about your feelings. It does not soften itself for you. It just sits there, factual and merciless, and makes you look at what actually happened instead of what you were told. What actually happened was premeditation, 22 months of it. Darnell's divorce attorney, my litigator noted, appeared to be managing this as a routine, largely uncontested dissolution. He had no indication that Victoria Cole had retained corporate counsel. He was negotiating with my divorce attorney as though the corporate angle did not exist, as though the equity stake were a minor footnote, the real estate transfer invisible, and the financial forensics simply not in play. He was working without the full board in front of him. My litigator was preparing the motion for fraudulent conveyance. It would be filed by end of week. Under state law, the transfer could be unwound. When she finished, I thanked her. She told me to review the authorization page she'd emailed and sign it electronically if I was ready to proceed. I printed it instead. I signed it with a pen, the way you sign something you mean. I set the pen down. I picked up my coffee. It had gone a little cool, but I drank it anyway. Nadine was watching me. "He's been planning this longer than I thought," I said. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at the signed page. Exactly what I've been doing. 1 week after the fraudulent conveyance motion was filed, Devin, my son, 21 years old and built like his father, but thank God nothing like him in the ways that mattered, showed up on a Thursday afternoon with a box of pizza and work clothes on. I had asked him to help me sort through the storage closet off the hallway, the one packed floor to ceiling with financial paperwork going back to the early years of our marriage. My litigator needed it. All of it, if possible. He did not ask too many questions. That is one of the things I love most about that boy. We ate standing at the counter, then got to work. The closet was deep and badly organized in the way that things get when you keep everything but never have a reason to look at any of it. Box after box of tax returns, utility bills, old insurance binders, folders I could not immediately identify. We made a system. Devin pulled boxes down. I sorted. We labeled the ones the litigator needed and stacked the rest against the opposite wall. We had been at it for nearly 2 hours when Devin said, "What about this one?" He held up a manila folder, unlabeled, tucked into the back of a box from 4 years ago. He handed it down to me. Old credit card statements, joint account, Darnell's card. I almost set them aside. Then I looked at the date on the first page. 4 years ago. Before the CEO talk. Before the board positioning. Before any of it. I sat down on the floor of the hallway and started reading. Hotel charges. Not business hotels. Boutique properties, the kind with room service menus and weekend rates. Dinner reservations at restaurants I recognized but had never been taken to. A spa charge on a Sunday afternoon. A wine bar I'd driven past for years and always meant to try. Devin sat down on the floor beside me, and I did not stop him from reading. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Isn't that the hotel we stayed at for my graduation trip? The one off the highway near Savannah?" My jaw locked. Same property, different weekend. 3 months before our family trip. I remembered that vacation clearly. Darnell had suggested the hotel himself, said he'd heard it was good. He had already been there. We did not say much after that. We did not need to. Devin handed me the pages one at a time, and I stacked them into a separate pile with the quiet, deliberate movements of someone who is keeping herself very controlled because the alternative is not something she can afford right now. He put his hand briefly on my shoulder. I nodded once. We kept working. He left around 8. I walked him to the door, hugged him the way you hug someone when you don't want them to see your face. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with the folder. You know what the cruelest part of a timeline is? It makes the happy memories complicit. Every dinner party I hosted in this house, the ones where Darnell laughed easily and refilled people's glasses and played the gracious husband, and I cooked and set the table and made everything look effortless. Those evenings exist on the same timeline as those hotel receipts. Those years I attended industry events on his arm, unnamed on every guest list, smiling at people who knew his name and not mine. All of it layered over something I was never told about. 4 years. Tara was not even at the company yet when it started. He built the relationship first, then created a job for it. Brought her in 18 months later, once the personal arrangement was already settled. I had wondered why he recommended her so specifically for the VP role. I had thought it was professional instinct. I had trusted that. The fear I had carried quietly for years, the one I never said out loud because saying it made it too real, pressed down on me that night with its full weight. That I had given the best years of my working life to support his climb, and in doing so had quietly, steadily made myself smaller. That a woman my age, a woman who had traded her career for someone else's ambition, did not get to start over. That my value had an expiration date, and I had spent past it taking care of everyone else. I let myself feel all of it. I did not perform composure for an empty room. Then I called Nadine. She was at my door in 40 minutes. She did not say anything when she walked in. She sat down, poured herself the coffee I had made, and waited. I talked for a long time, not strategically, not toward any point. I grieved out loud, the way you can only do in front of someone who has known you since you were 20 years old and does not need you to hold it together. For the years, for the effort, for the version of myself I handed over piece by piece and called it love. Nadine listened. She did not try to fix it. She just stayed. Past midnight, I went quiet. Then I said, "Okay, I know what I need to know." I closed the folder. I went to bed. The morning after Nadine left, I was at Raymond's office before 9. 4 hours of sleep. maybe less. But I was dressed, I had coffee, and I had work to do. Let me tell you something about the morning after you grieve. The grief does not disappear. It just compresses, packs itself down into something dense and quiet that sits beneath your sternum and does not move. You learn to work around it. I had been doing that my whole adult life without realizing it. I sat down at my desk and opened my files. The call I had been waiting on came at 10:30. The operations director at a mid-sized manufacturer, a company that had been a secondary vendor relationship for Darnell's logistics network for years, had reviewed my proposal over the weekend. He had questions about the rate structure and the account management model. We talked for 22 minutes. I answered every question without overselling a single word. At the end, he said, "We'd like to move forward." I wrote it down in my notebook, circled it once, set the pen down. Raymond was across the room on his own call. When he hung up, he looked at me. I held up 5 fingers. He nodded slowly, the way older men do when something confirms what they already believed. 5 anchor clients, 7 vendor relationships, a 6-month operating runway, fully structured by Nadine and clean enough that my litigator had reviewed it without a single flag. Cole Freight Partners was no longer a business plan on a borrowed desk. It was a functioning operation. I did not allow myself the big exhale. Not yet. I poured fresh coffee and went back to work. You know what Darnell's attorneys had been assuming? That they were managing a grief-stricken woman and a routine divorce, a process they could slow walk while the assets settled exactly where they wanted them. The fraudulent conveyance motion landed on their desks that same week. I was not in the room. I did not need to be. My corporate litigator called me at noon to confirm service had been completed. She said Darnell's team had already called her office twice. She described the tone of the second call as less composed than the first. I told her I appreciated the update. I asked her to hold all responses until I directed otherwise. He called me at 2:17 in the afternoon. First time since the papers were served. First time in weeks that his name had appeared on my phone screen as anything other than a notification on a legal document. I let it ring once. Then I answered. His voice was careful, measured in a way that told me he had practiced it, or been coached through it. Gone was the man who told mutual friends I couldn't keep up. What I heard instead was something calibrated to sound like reason. "Victoria, Look, I want to talk, because I think this has gotten more complicated than either of us intended, and I genuinely believe we can resolve this privately, between people who know each other. There's no reason for this to become a whole... there are attorneys involved now that don't need to be, and I think if we just sat down, without all of that around us, we could find a way through this that works for both of us. You know me. I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. That was never the point." He paused. "I just think we can do better than this." My hands went still on the desk. I waited until I was certain he was finished. Then I said, "I'll see you at the mediation." I hung up, poured coffee, went back to my desk. That is all that moment required. That evening, I called my corporate litigator and told her to proceed with full discovery. Everything. Financial records, communication logs, the company's board meeting minutes for the past 3 years. All of it. She did not ask whether I was sure. She said she would begin filing the following morning. After I hung up, I sat for a moment with the quiet. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I had not called in over a year. A senior director at Darnell's company, a woman I had known at the edges of his professional world for years. Industry dinners, a conference or two, one of the few people in that orbit who had always spoken to me directly, asked real questions, treated me like I had a brain behind the smile. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was cautious when she heard mine, not unfriendly. Cautious, like someone who already knew a conversation like this was coming, eventually. I asked if she would meet me for coffee the following morning. I said it would not take long. I said I only needed to ask her one question. She said yes. We met at a cafe 2 miles from her office. She arrived exactly on time, ordered nothing, and folded her hands on the table. I did not ease into it. I laid out what I already knew: the timeline, the hire date, the relationship that predated Tara's employment by 18 months. I kept my voice level. I kept my eyes on hers. Then I asked, who else at the company knew about Tara before she was hired? She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I did not fill the silence. Then she said she would provide a written statement. The morning of the mediation, I was up at 5:30. I did not rush. I made coffee, I ironed my blouse, and I chose the charcoal blazer I had bought 3 months ago and never worn. Clean lines, no flourish, nothing that needed to prove itself. I stood in the mirror for a moment and looked at the woman looking back at me. She was ready. The mediator's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, neutral territory, beige walls, a long conference table that was supposed to make everyone feel like equals. I arrived 8 minutes early, with my divorce attorney on my left and my corporate litigator on my right. 2 counsel, seated side by side. Darnell and his attorney were already there. That surprised me. He was never early to anything. He must have needed the psychological advantage of already being in the room. I noted it, sat down, set my hands flat on the table. He looked good. That was true, and I allowed it to be true without letting it cost me anything. New suit, close shave, the particular posture of a man who believes the outcome has already been negotiated in his favor. He glanced at my corporate litigator with something that wasn't quite curiosity. His attorney leaned over and said something quietly. Darnell's jaw settled. The mediator opened the session. My team went first. I remember making Darnell's coffee the morning he came home from his first industry conference. He was 29, nervous in a way he tried to hide under bravado. I ironed his shirts the night before and told him he was the most capable person in that room, and I believed it completely. That was a long time ago. My corporate litigator spoke without theatrics. She laid 3 items on the table in sequence, each one accompanied by a tabbed document set slid across to Darnell's attorney. First, the equity stake, my $40,000 inheritance, the founding documents bearing my name, the current third-party valuation, $800,000 on the conservative end, $1.1 million at current market. Signed, dated, valid, and deliberately omitted from the divorce petition. Darnell's attorney picked up the document. His face did not change. Darnell's did, just slightly, a flicker at the corner of his mouth that he controlled quickly. Second, the fraudulent conveyance motion, already filed, already in the public record. The distribution depot transferred into a private LLC 3 months before Darnell served the papers, supported by a 22-month forensic financial timeline showing systematic, premeditated asset repositioning. Dedicated accounts, legal consultations billed through company overhead, every move dated, documented, and legally characterized. This was where Darnell's attorney stopped taking notes. He set his pen down. Third, you know what I felt, watching my litigator slide that 3rd document across the table? Nothing dramatic. My hands stayed perfectly still. I had known this moment was coming for weeks. I had built toward it like a woman with a blueprint. The senior director's written statement. Dated, signed, notarized. Confirming that Tara Rowe's hire had been discussed internally as a retention arrangement for an executive relationship that predated her employment by 18 months. That at least 3 board members had knowledge of the affair prior to the CEO confirmation vote. That Tara was named, not as a passive party, but as a participant in the arrangement. The governance exposure was explicit. The statement opened the company to formal shareholder challenge. Tara's name was on it, in print, on the record. Darnell's attorney asked for a recess before my litigator had finished speaking. They were gone for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the far wall. When they came back, Darnell's attorney addressed my divorce attorney. He used the measured, rerouted language of a man trying to recover control of a room he had already lost. He suggested a framework. He used the word reasonable 4 times in 3 sentences. Darnell was looking at the table. Then he looked up and started to speak, to me, around his attorney, in that same practiced voice from the phone call. Victoria, I want you to know that I never intended. I stopped him. Not with volume, with stillness. I looked at him directly, not at his attorney, not at the mediator, at him. The man I made coffee for 16 years. The man who filed papers the same morning he accepted a title he built on my labor and my money and my silence. I said, "You thought the marriage was over because you decided it was." I let that sit. I need you to understand that the only thing over is the version of this where I had less than you. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The room was completely still. His attorney did not speak. The mediator did not speak. Darnell looked at me for a long moment, and whatever he saw, it was not the woman he thought he was leaving behind. The session closed with a settlement framework on the table. My legal team would draft the final terms. I walked out of the building ahead of everyone, got into my car, sat in the silence for exactly 1 minute, not performing it, not savoring it, just allowing it. Then I drove to Raymond's office. There was still work to do. The final terms took 11 days. I know because I counted them. Not from anxiety, but from discipline. Every morning I checked in with my divorce attorney. Every afternoon I checked in with my corporate litigator. I kept a legal pad on the kitchen counter with a running list of open items, and I crossed each one off in pen, not pencil. Pencil implies you might need to go back. I didn't. 11 days after the mediation, Darnell signed. His attorney advised him he had no viable alternative, and that was the only reason I ever heard for why he did it. Not remorse, not recognition. His attorney did the math and told him the math was bad. That was enough. The settlement delivered everything my team had built toward. Full buyout of my equity stake at verified valuation, $1.08 million, landing between the two numbers my corporate litigator had put on the table. Reversal of the fraudulent real estate transfer, which meant that distribution depot came back into the marital estate and was divided accordingly, and an equitable split of every marital asset Darnell had spent 22 months trying to quietly reclassify, relocate, or erase. He got less than he planned. I got exactly what I was owed. Let me tell you something. Those are not the same victory, but they are both real. The governance review moved on its own timeline, independent of the divorce. The board initiated it within 10 days of receiving the director's written statement. I did not push it. I did not need to. The documentation was clean, the statement was notarized, and 3 board members had the particular problem of knowing things they should have disclosed before the CEO confirmation vote. 2 of them resigned within 3 weeks. Quietly. No announcement, no fanfare. Their names simply disappeared from the company's website. That is how institutional consequence works. Not a scene, not a statement, just an absence where a name used to be. Tara's position became untenable around the same time. Her name was in the governance findings. Her name was in the improper hiring documentation. She could not publicly distance herself from either without deepening her own exposure. Every denial would have required her to explain what she actually knew and when. She made the calculation most people make when the walls close in. She resigned within 60 days. No severance. The company's legal exposure around her hire made that conversation short. I remember the first time I saw her at one of Darnell's industry events. She'd handed me a glass of water because she assumed I was catering staff. I didn't correct her. I just smiled and moved on. She built her entire professional identity on Darnell's trajectory. His contacts were her contacts. His credibility was her credibility. His rise was the architecture of her resume. When that structure cracked, she had no independent foundation to stand on. Doors stopped opening. Not dramatically. There was no public reckoning, no industry announcement, just the quiet physics of a network that belongs to the person who built it. And she had not built it. She had borrowed it. That is the punishment that fits the crime. Not a scene, just silence where opportunity used to be. 2 months after the settlement, 2 of Darnell's anchor clients moved their contracts to Cole Freight Partners. Raymond made the introductions. I made the pitches. They chose us because our rates were better and our account management was attentive, and we returned calls the same day. I did not announce it. I did not need to. It simply happened. Devin came to the new apartment for dinner on a Thursday evening, 6 weeks after I'd moved in. The apartment was clean and spare and entirely mine. No furniture chosen to impress anyone. No cabinet layout optimized around someone else's habits. I cooked the way I used to cook before cooking became a performance. Simple, seasoned right, no apology. I remembered teaching Devin to fold a paper bag when he was 7, standing in this kitchen that looked nothing like this one. Telling him a neat fold means you respect the thing you're storing. He'd practiced it 20 times until he got it right. He was a good kid. He became a good man. We ate and talked about his work, his girlfriend, ordinary things. Then he set his fork down and looked at me with the specific expression he gets when he's been thinking about something longer than he wanted to. "Mom," he said, "how did you know what to do? All of it. The equity, the lawyers, the company. How did you know?" My hands went still around my glass. "I was in this industry for 6 years before I ever married your father," I said. "I stopped working. I didn't stop knowing." He nodded slowly, looked at his plate, then back at me. "He really had no idea," Devin said, not as a question. "No," I said, "he didn't." 2 weeks later, I signed the final settlement paperwork at my attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon, countersigned in 3 places, initialed in 7, dated at the bottom. My attorney shook my hand and said it had been an honor. My corporate litigator said I had been the most prepared client she had worked with in 19 years. I thanked them both. Then I walked out into the afternoon. I stopped at the curb. The sun was sitting low and direct, the way it gets in late autumn, and I tilted my face toward it for one moment, not performing anything, not celebrating anything out loud, just standing in it. Then I got in my car and drove. 18 months after the settlement. The Regional Freight and Logistics Conference had been held at the same downtown hotel for 11 consecutive years. Same ballroom, same burgundy carpet with the pattern that looked like interlocking gears if you stared at it long enough. Same coffee station outside the main hall that ran out of the good creamer by 8:15 every single morning. I knew this hotel the way you know a place you were never fully allowed to occupy. I'd stood in that lobby 12 times on Darnell's arm. 12 times I'd watched him move through a room, handshakes, backslaps, the particular laugh he reserved for people he needed something from. I knew his networking voice the way I knew the sound of the dishwasher finishing its cycle. I could have mapped his routes through every cocktail hour from memory. My name never appeared on a badge. Not once. You know what you do with that? You file it. You keep moving. You do not let it become the story you tell yourself about your own worth. But you do not forget it either. I arrived Thursday evening and went straight to my room. Cole Freight Partners had 7 employees now. Contracts in Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. A 6th anchor client signed the previous month. We'd been shortlisted for the Regional Growth Award, mid-market category, and Raymond had sent me a text that morning that said only, "Don't let them give it to anyone else." My name was on the conference program, not as a sponsor, not as an attendee, as a keynote speaker. Friday morning, 9 o'clock, Operational Strategy for Mid-Market Freight Brokerages. I set my bag down and did not make a production of the moment. I hung my suit. I reviewed my notes for 20 minutes, the same notes I'd already reviewed 4 times, not because I was uncertain, but because preparation is a form of respect for the room you're about to walk into. I ordered room service and ate at the small desk by the window. There was no version of this that required me to feel triumphant in private. The work was the point. The work had always been the point. Still, I thought about her. The woman I was 12 months into this marriage, standing in this exact hotel lobby with a glass of sparkling water in her hand, because the bartender had assumed she wanted what the other wives were having. I thought about how good she was at making herself unobtrusive, how skilled, how completely she had mastered the art of being present without taking up space. I remembered pressing Darnell's conference shirts the night before one of these trips. 4 of them, perfectly creased, hung in the order he'd want them. I'd been good at that. I'd been good at so many invisible things. She did not deserve what happened to her, but she also could not have done what I just did. Was I angry at her? No, I was just glad she kept the records. Friday morning, I dressed without ceremony. Navy suit, low heels, the small pearl earrings I bought myself the week Cole Freight Partners signed its third contract. I looked at myself in the mirror, the way I check a shipment manifest, not for admiration, but for confirmation. Everything accounted for, everything in order. I took the elevator down. The lobby was doing what hotel lobbies do the morning of a conference. Controlled chaos. Lanyards and rolling bags and clusters of people who had not seen each other since last year. I knew some of the faces. Some of them knew mine now in a way they hadn't 18 months ago. I walked at my own pace. Near the entrance to the conference hall, the foot traffic slowed. A group of men had stopped to greet each other. The loud, easy reunion of people who know their own belonging is not up for question. I stepped slightly to the right to move around them. That was when I saw her. She was standing just to the side of the group, late 20s, maybe 30. Her lanyard said, attendee. She had the posture of someone who had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space. Not too much, not enough to be noticed. Her eyes were moving the way mine used to move, tracking the room, reading the dynamics, cataloging who mattered to whom and why. Careful eyes. Watchful in the specific way that comes from being overlooked so consistently that observation becomes the only power available to you. The man beside her was mid-sentence with someone else. He did not glance at her. He did not put a hand at her back. He did not say her name. My chest did not tighten. I did not perform recognition for anyone watching. I simply slowed my steps. She looked up, the reflex of someone always checking who is near, and our eyes met. I held it. 1 full beat. 2. Then I gave her a nod, small, unhurried, deliberate. Not sympathy, not pity, something older and more useful than either of those things. I see you, and you are not invisible to everyone. Her chin lifted, barely, just a fraction, and something in her expression shifted. I turned and walked to the stage. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!